We need Julian Assange. And one thing I want to say to you today is, it is not only that he is the victim of torture, it is not only that his life is at stake, it is not only we want to save him from a dreadful injustice, we also want to save him because the world needs Julian Assange as a symbol and fighter for liberty in these times.
Well, that was the great Craig Murray at the top of the show, along with Anton Karas, the third man. Craig Murray, that speech was given in December of 2019, just prior to the first leg of the Assange extradition hearing. So we're going to have Craig Murray on for the entire show. Don't go anywhere. Today, he hasn't given an interview since his conviction and sentencing, and we got him here today. Craig Murray is just simply the best. Now, the other day on BAI, I did a tribute to Bill Kunstler, but what I didn't get in, because we didn't have enough time, it's only a 25-minute show on Wednesday, was this speech by William Kunstler, and it's from Disturbing the Universe by Emily and Sarah Kunstler. And it is him after the Chicago 7, Chicago 8 trial and the convictions and contempt and all of that. And he comes out and delivers this speech that really embodies what is happening to Julian Assange and also to Craig Murray. So we're going to play this. It's about show trials, the whole concept of legal. We'll be right back right after we play this.
And that's the terrible myth of organized society, that everything that's done through the established system is legal. And that word has a powerful psychological impact. It makes people believe that there is an order to life and an order to a system, and that a person that goes through this order and is convicted has gotten all that is due him. And therefore society can turn its conscience off and look to other things and other times. And that's the terrible thing about these past trials, is that they have this aura of legitimacy, this aura of legality. I suspect that better men than the world has known, and more of them, have gone to their death through a legal system than through all the illegalities in the history of man. 6 million people in Europe during the Third Reich, legal. Sacco Vanzetti, quite legal. The Haymarket defendants, legal. The hundreds of rape trials throughout the South, where black men were condemned to death, all legal. Jesus, legal. Socrates, legal. And that is the kaleidoscopic nature of what we live through here and in other places. Because all tyrants learn that it is far better to do this thing through some semblance of legality than to do it without that pretense.
There you go. That was Bill Kunstler. Man, he was right on. So our show, which is no longer Assange Countdown to Freedom for the time being on Saturday nights at 6 p.m., going to be running as I am talking right now, will continue to be on my website, our website, AssangeCountdownToFreedom.com or randycredico.com. We will continue doing our show every week. And if you'd like to support us, please do, AssangeCountdownToFreedom.com. It's really a low-cost, high-yield operation. We're in it until the very end. All right, so Craig Murray, ex-ambassador to Uzbekistan, an author of many books, Murder in Samarkand, and his epic classic, Sikandar Burns, The Life of Alexander Burns. And he was in Western Africa. He's a human rights crusader, a great journalist. And, he's a Renaissance man or Enlightenment man of the Scottish Enlightenment. He's right there with those folks. So we're going to be right back with the great Craig Murray after a few moments of Supertramp's Logical Song.
When I was young, it seemed that life was so wonderful. A miracle, oh, it was beautiful, magical. And all the birds in the trees, well, they be singing so happily. Oh, joyfully, oh, playfully, watching me. But then they sent me away to teach me how to be sensible, logical, oh, responsible, practical. And then they showed me a world where I could be so dependable, oh, clinical, oh, intellectual, cynical. There are times when all the world's asleep, but questions run too deep for such a simple mind. Won't you please tell me?
That was Supertramp, The Logical Song. I'm Randy Critical, live on the fly on 99.5 FM in New York City, WBAI.org, give to WBAI.org. And also this is Assange Countdown to Freedom, which will be on our website at the same time that it will be on WBAI. You can see the video. This is our last Assange Countdown to Freedom at WBAI. We've been doing it here for on and off for 5 years, but for the past 4 months, we were filling in for somebody, but we got comfortable in this spot, and it's been doing very well internationally. And the show started back in 2017, and one of the solid bedrocks of this program, always generous with his time, is the person I talked about in my preamble, and that is former ambassador to Uzbekistan, West African diplomat, author, human rights crusader. They got a great blog, and that's Craig Murray. Craig Murray, thank you for joining us on this last Assange Countdown to Freedom show. You're appropriate for it because we can't follow you anyway.
Thank you, and it's a great honor and privilege to be in the last show of this. What's been an absolutely tremendous series. And when you look back at the guests you've brought in to the radio station and some of the amazing people you've interviewed in this series, I think it's been a tremendous piece of broadcasting, a tremendous feat of broadcasting. I think you should be congratulated on that, man.
Well, thank you, but it is what it is. And like I said, the show will go on no matter what. And I think it's critical that not just this show, this is not about me. This is about Julian Assange. You've been, even through your own trials and tribulations, have been out there and spent a lot of time in support of Julian. You were just in London in front of Parliament. You continue, like I said, and you've got your own headaches, personal headaches going on, legal headaches. What drives you? Is this a case that important to you as it is to me? I know it is, but it's a rhetorical question.
Yeah. Well, I think there are two parts to that answer. The first part is that the extraordinary legal twisting and cheating and the refusal to follow important principles of the law and of the United States Constitution in the persecution of Julian Assange, the way the state has been behaving, needs to be fought, whoever was the subject of that, whoever they were doing that to. It's a terrible, terrible thing. The second half, of course, is that they are doing it to Julian Assange, who is a truly remarkable person, a truly remarkable human being, a tremendous intellect, a man of fantastic achievement, somebody who exposed to the world the dirty side of government, who gave people more understanding of the way that governments work all over the world, and of the lies and dirty tricks and war crimes carried out by governments. Julian Assange made a major breakthrough in the way that the people could understand those who govern them. And so he's somebody who needs to be out there contributing to society. And now we are facing other constraints on freedom of information, on the flow of information. The internet is increasingly regulated. We have the corporate gatekeepers like Facebook and Twitter suppressing narratives which disagree with the government-approved narrative. We need a second internet revolution to democratize information and democratize argument and democratize political life. And I think Julian will have a major role to play in helping that second internet revolution come about. So yeah, I mean, what is happening to him is terrible, whoever it was happening to, and he is a very important human being who we need to have back in society and not held for no good reason whatsoever in maximum security.
As you said before, I mean, he spent his like a 6-month sentence for bail jumping, and you pointed out that there are tens of thousands of people in the UK who they're not chasing around to arrest for violating, bail laws. And that's really, he's now spent 2.5 years. And then, of course, the 7 years plus that he spent in the Ecuadorian embassy. We're talking about 10 years of a man's life altogether. It's astounding. What, Craig, do you think that the powers that be are so fearful of when it comes to Julian Assange and his work at WikiLeaks?
I think the powers that be depend upon the control of information. They wouldn't be in power at all if they weren't in control of the propaganda narrative. And the threat to their control of the propaganda narrative, it strikes at the very roots of their power, because if the ordinary people understood how the world is run, how it's organized, how dishonest those who govern us are, how the resources of the world are ripped off by a tiny elite who are exploiting the rest of us, then this state of affairs wouldn't be allowed to continue. The population are kept quiescent by false information. So anybody who threatens a fundamental information revolution, as WikiLeaks did, is a massive threat to the state, and a threat they will never forgive.
Yeah, you and I sat next to each other. Actually, you sat next to John Shipton at the Belmourish part of this two-prong extradition hearing, which was more of a trial, I think, because they were trying him on these charges, basically, and saying this is the reason why. And the judge agreed with that second part. So he said, okay, we're not going to send him because the prison conditions are bad. But then she basically concurred with everything that the state was charging him with. What did you make of that?
I found it quite astonishing, and we were very lucky to get into that first part at Belmarsh. As you remember, getting in was a huge challenge. We had to queue at 5 a.m. in January in 0 degree.
February.
Yeah. Zero, even minus freezing temperatures in London. It was extremely cold and unpleasant. And the conditions of getting into that sort of prison camp-like court, with all the steel fences and the guards and the bulletproof glass and everything, it was in itself an act of kind of physical intimidation by the state. And this is a trial which is meant to be open to the public. Justice is meant to be public. We weren't doing anything wrong. We were we were exercising our legal privilege as members of the public to go and watch a trial. And we were made to queue for hours in the freezing cold, to stand behind gates and barbed wire, to go through metal detectors, and only to end up behind bulletproof glass with listening through dodgy speakers where it was very difficult to hear anything that was happening. So that gave you the whole atmosphere of the trial. And the things that were fundamentally wrong, I mean, the fact that the UK-US extradition treaty states specifically that you cannot be extradited for a political offense. And that the US and UK government said that that doesn't apply because the UK-US extradition treaty had never been passed into UK law. But at the same time, they were extraditing him under the treaty that had never been passed into UK law. So to argue we can extradite him under the treaty, but at the same time ignore its provisions was a fundamentally weird argument. And that was just the start of all the procedural strangenesses in that trial. It really was, and you're right, it should be called a trial because that's effectively what it was. It was very unpleasant to be there. Yeah, it was an unpleasant thing. Obviously, sitting next to John Shipton, seeing Stella Morris every day, being so close to people who aren't just friends of Julian, but are his family, and it was emotionally devastating for them. That made it a tougher experience. But it was, anyway, you felt like you were in the presence of evil when you were seeing the security state clamping down on this very vulnerable individual who was plainly in poor health and was suffering terrible degradation the whole time in terms of being strip searched continually, being rectally searched, being intimidated, not being allowed to have his trial papers and documents. So he wasn't allowed to follow the trial in terms of knowing what was happening, not allowed to sit next to his lawyers. It was a horrible exercise in humiliation we were observing, and it was just nasty to be there. I apologize, that was a long answer.
Well,
but
that's a good answer. I do adduce to your observation that the conditions were bad. It was 5 o'clock in the morning that we had to line up. That's after getting back from the Great Harry saloon at 2 in the morning and coming in with a nasty hangover. But, I was able to pick it up waiting until 9 o'clock when the proceedings started. And and you're right. I took photos. We'll talk about your contempt charges, but I know what I did was contempt, taking photos. But I just had to do it, Craig. When I saw Stella looking and with that anguished face at Julian, who was physically, and I know mentally, not crazy, but just like mentally drained. And then looking at John and Gabriel sitting to my right in between you. And look, I said, well, my God, I got to do something with this. I know it's illegal, but why not show that, John? Craig, why not? And I said that to John the other day, why not show that, what was going on down there? You look, Eichmann, you take a look at the Eichmann trial in 1961, he was in a similar cage, but he had access to his lawyers that were sitting right in front of him. To put him, juxtapose it next to Eichmann in that glass cage back in 1961 is kind of eerie. We're talking about a guy who is responsible for Holocaust rather than a guy who is exposing war crimes and exposing human rights abuses.
Yeah, that's true. No, you're right. And I actually did some research on this. And one of the things, Julian, he's not been allowed the papers from a trial, the documents, he's not allowed them in his prison cell. He's not allowed to read, what's coming up at court the next day in order to instruct his lawyers. And he's given 30 minutes with his lawyers every 2 weeks in order to try to, give instructions on an incredibly complex trial, which has thousands of pages of documents in it, which he's not given access to. So some of the worst criminals in history have been given far better conditions than Julian has been given in order to be able to defend himself. It really has been quite remarkable to witness this kind of charade of a court case that's going on. And as you know, there were numerous occasions where the defense made an application. And for example, when the second superseding indictment was sprung on the defense, where this guy Forderson in Iceland, I know we'll come on to that, but where after that Belmarsh start of the hearing in February, when it was obvious that the case wasn't going well for the prosecution, they then came up with a whole raft of new charges after the hearing had started and after the opening arguments had been heard. And this is astonishing. You've already had a week of opening arguments for both sides, and then you totally change the arguments with what they call the charges. Absolutely new charges, new crimes in what they call the second superseding indictment. And the defense asked for more time to prepare a defense against these new charges, and it was denied. And that was yet another occasion. Whenever the defense made such an application, they argue their case for the application in court, and the prosecution argues against it. And then Judge Baraitser gives her ruling. And every time that happened, she brought into court a written ruling against the defense, against Assange. And that written ruling was written before she heard the arguments. And we witnessed that. You and I witnessed that happening back in, I can't remember what were the exact issues then, but it happened 2 or 3 times back in that week in Belmarsh, where whenever there was a procedural aspect to be decided, she would have the ruling already written. And whether it was written by her or written for her is an interesting question. I suspect it was written for her to read out. But she always had those rulings either on paper or on her laptop. And we could see her very plainly from where we were sitting. And she had the rulings before she heard the arguments from the lawyers. And that to me really took the whole thing down to level of farce and theatre, because it didn't matter what happened in that court. It made no difference what the lawyers said, because she'd made the rulings before she heard the arguments.
Yeah, you wrote about that in your dispatches at craigmurray.org.uk, I believe that's your website, Craig Murray. Okay, and are those dispatches still up? I know you shut down your website for a while, but are they still archived there?
Yeah, no, the website's back up, and the only stuff that's been removed is related to my own court case on another subject completely, but all of the Assange reports are back up on my website now.
John Shipton and I were talking about this, how you were able to go to that and not even take notes. I don't think. Maybe you did take notes in shorthand, but and then when it was over at 5 o'clock, you'd have a press conference, you'd buy to eat, you get 2 hours sleep, and by 7 o'clock in the morning or even earlier, you had a 5,000 word dispatch describing in great detail the entire day's proceedings. You did that not only there, but you did it again back in September at the Old Bailey. Where do you draw that energy?
Oh, it's very good malt whiskey, Andy. That's the answer. It's very good malt whiskey.
Wait a second, you're talking about single malt or you're talking about a blend?
No, single malt. Lagavulin mostly I drink, but any of the smoky, peaty West Coast or island whiskies I like from Scotland. But no, it was, to be honest, it was difficulty. It really was quite hard. And I think the longest of my daily dispatches was 8,000 words long, which, as as anyone who's written knows, that's a lot to produce in one day in any circumstances, and to do it as well as sitting 8 hours through a court hearing is just it's a physical as well as a mental feat, and certainly in the autumn hearings, where I had to keep up that productivity for about 4 weeks. That was tricky, and I was doing it on maybe 3 hours sleep a night and writing through the night. I mean, I would publish every morning about 7 a.m. and that would be having been up all night. I just say I did take notes. I took. I don't do shorthand, but I just write very quickly in my own form of shorthand, if you like. My own abbreviations of things that I understand. I filled 3 reporters' notebooks. I took voluminous notes, and I have a very good memory. And after each day, after the hearings, we do some brief press statements and interviews. And I'd go back to the hotel. I'd grab a bite to eat. So by then it's about 6:30 in the evening. I'd sleep for maybe 2 to 3 hours till about 9:30. Then 10 o'clock, having got all my notes and everything in order, I'd start to write it up. And I'd write from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. till 7 a.m. 7 a.m. I would publish. Then I'd have something to eat, go to court, and start again. But I mean, I was going on 3 hours sleep a night, probably maximum, during the weekday.
I mean, without a copy editor, so you had to edit it yourself.
Yeah.
Talking with Craig Murray, human rights crusader, former ambassador to Uzbekistan, and the author of one of the great works, biographies, and that is Sikander Burns, which I was in Edinburgh. I met you there personally back in September of 2017. I think I bought 6 books at that great bookstore in your old neighborhood when you gave me that tour. And it really is, if you can still get that book, and I recommend people get Sikander Burns. It is an incredible journey. And it's very similar, Burns, to your life, basically, that you were trying to report back. Burns was trying to report back that the situation in Kabul was not good, and they chose the wrong person to be the leader. I forgot Mohammed Dast, or if it was Shah Shuha. I haven't read the book now in 2 years, but I'm drifting off to that, Craig. But it is quite an epic. How's it doing, by the way?
It's done very well. It's sold. I mean, it's as you know, it's a very serious footnoted history book, so it's never going to be a kind of bestseller. But it sold very successfully, and it's interesting because, of course, finally having the UK and US are finally pulling out pretty well all their forces from Afghanistan this last day or two, having been defeated again. That's the 4th defeat for the United Kingdom in Afghanistan. And there's so much you can learn from history. And that book shows you that many of the conflicts going on were exactly the same conflicts, ethnically based often, and to do with land and resources, which have been going on for hundreds of years. But the side which the British were on was exactly the same side we were on, with the same tribal allies we had in 1840 when we first invaded Afghanistan. And not only that, the same families. I mean, we reinstated Shah Shuja, and the first, unsuccessfully, and the first president of Afghanistan instated by the British and Americans when they invaded was President Karzai, right, who was from the same royal family as Shah Shuja, and not a direct descendant, but a close descendant, and from exactly the same family in exactly the same tribe in that extremely fractured and disputed society. and the people we were fighting were exactly the same people we've been fighting, their descendants. But we've been the same people we were fighting in the same places as we did in 1840, and we lost again. We've just lost again, and that nobody pretend that, you know, the United States or the United Kingdom is leaving Afghanistan this last couple of days covered in glory. We're losing after military defeat by the Taliban. We were defeated just as surely as the United States was defeated in Vietnam. And the people we were fighting are going to be in full control of Afghanistan within a year.
You know, Afghanistan, this was a joke I used to say, they're difficult to beat. They're 36-0 at home. They're not a good road team, but at home, if you're a betting person, always take Afghanistan at home with the points because you will never lose. That's a big parlay. It's like I said, it's called Secundus Burns, and I highly recommend it. I want to get back to there was no Assange back then because I don't think the British press really knew what was going on. I don't think the British press back then, they were getting disinformation. Was it from Lord Palmerston?
Yeah, that's one of the absolutely fascinating things I discovered, that Alexander Burns was against he ended up leading it because he was ordered to, but he was against and tried to stop the British invasion of Afghanistan. He wrote back all these letters and dispatches from Kabul saying, don't do this. And the government published in the UK edited versions of his letters and dispatches in which all the bits that said, do not invade Afghanistan, do not go for regime change, do not displace the existing monarch, all those bits were edited out. So they produced a selection of his, for public consumption, of his letters and dispatches, which appeared to say we should invade. And it was all by cunning editing and doctoring, and was all completely deliberate. So back then, governments were doing exactly the same kind of tricks they do now. The extent to which nothing changes is really quite scary.
Yeah, they were called blue books, I believe, that were sent back. Blue books. So that book had quite an impression where I can remember some of the detail. And like I said, there was no Assange back then. The press had no idea what was going on. I mean, there was no telegraphs. It would take, from Afghanistan to London, would take a couple of months to traverse from east to west.
8 months. If you sent a letter, it took 8 months to get there.
Wow, that must have been quite a postal rate. So let's get back, going back to Julian's case, which we were talking about. You know, people use the term Kafkaesque, and I disagree with that because Joseph K. in the trial by Kafka had no idea why he was in a courtroom and on trial. I think Julian, and I think we all know why he is on trial. He's on trial because of what he has done legally, and that is to practice journalism. That got a lot of people uncomfortable. War logs, Cablegate, Vault 7. That's the reason why he is on trial. Do you disagree with that?
I think that's absolutely right. He's on trial for exposing war crimes in effect. And I think probably Vault 7, more than anything, is what caused the kind of unrelenting hostility to him from the security services. You know, when he is putting out essentially the operations manuals of the CIA, then that's something that is going to endure their undying enmity. And we shouldn't forget some of the stuff that was in these. I mean, my favorite one of all from the Vault 7 revelations is the stuff about how to hack into computers and then leave traces to make it look like the Russians did it. And in particular, how you should leave behind little bits of the Russian alphabet, of Cyrillic script. And this is a CIA training instruction, basically. But it's extraordinarily circular because it comes back to all the nonsense of of the Russian hacking allegations from 2016, which were just completely untrue, and the fact that the kind of things that CrowdStrike claimed they found, with no evidence whatsoever that they found anything at all, we should say. CrowdStrike never were able to produce any evidence of hacking, and in the end, they eventually admitted there was no evidence of hacking. But those initial claims included things like having found little bits of Cyrillic script left behind by the hackers. It appeared to be the exact template of the CIA how to pretend it was a Russians operation.
Right. Exactly. Craig Murray, .org.uk. There's a treasure trove of great articles that you've written over the years, and I recommend people go there. With Julian, I spoke to John Pilger the other day, and I'm sure you would concur with this. He said that if Julian is extradited to the U.S., it will be the end of freedom. Is that hyperbole, or do you subscribe to it?
Well, I think that there are a great many ways we are facing the end of freedom. It'll certainly be the death of the First Amendment. I mean, the First Amendment is meaningless, and we must remember that one of the things which the American government specifically argued in court was that in the famous New York Times case with Daniel Ellsberg and his revelations, they argued that Ellsberg was never charged under the Espionage Act, and that there's no First Amendment defense to the Espionage Act. And had Ellsberg been charged under the Espionage Act, he would have been convicted and imprisoned, and everybody at the newspaper would have been sent to prison as well. And they said that outright in the court in London last autumn. That what went wrong with the Daniel Ellsberg Pentagon Papers was that he was charged under the wrong act. If they charged him under the Espionage Act, he would have been guilty then. So this totally wipes out all First Amendment protection in the United States, in effect. So it says that the Espionage Act trumps the First Amendment. And if they get away with that, that's, of course, a massive blow to press freedom. But John Pilger was also talking more symbolically about Assange's role and what he stands for. And the fact that allowing anybody who's such a great journalist and publisher and has played such a pivotal role to be destroyed, in effect, shows that society no longer cares about freedom. But in the UK this very week in the UK, we've had a policing and crime bill passed through Parliament, which essentially says that you can only have a demonstration or a vigil if it's approved at first by the police, and that the police can refuse it on the grounds that it's a public nuisance or inconvenient or will impede passage. And of course, every demonstration has ever been impedes passage. If you're not impeding passage, if a vehicle can pass straight through the middle of your demonstration, then it's not a very good demonstration. This will give the police the power to just stop any demonstration. Full stop.
Wait a second. You're telling me that the demonstration where I saw you speak off the top of your head in front of Parliament on February 22nd, 2020, they could just say no?
Yeah, they could just say no. It essentially makes the right of free assembly and the right of freedom of speech subject entirely to police regulation. It in effect absolutely changes the law in that regard. And the Council of Europe Commissioner on Human Rights has written to the British government to tell them it's illegal. But not only that, the same week, we've had the government publish proposals to send asylum seekers to detention camps in Africa to be held pending resolution of their asylum cases, on the grounds that asylum seekers have entered the country illegally. Well, of course they have. There's no legal method by which an asylum seeker can enter the country. It has been made illegal for anyone to enter with the purpose of claiming asylum. So that again puts us totally at odds of our obligations under the Refugee Convention. But can you imagine? I mean, even the current governments in the United States wouldn't do that. Can you imagine if they said the solution to the border problems is to ship all asylum seekers to Africa to a detention camp? And John Pilger is right. I think we are seeing the destruction of freedoms, and it genuinely scares me how few people care. It really does. The fact that legislation that appalling can be passed, and people aren't protesting against it, or only a small minority of people are protesting against it. That worries me enormously. There are people who, have critiques of Western capitalism, and particularly of its economic consequences, and I understand those and sympathize with them. But in terms of human freedom and liberty, there were great achievements of Western society. Those seem to be disappearing. If you like, the plus side of Western democracy in terms of the individual freedoms and civil liberties it bestows seem to be devalued and be being removed, at the same time as the downsides, in particular the vast inequalities of wealth, seem to be getting worse and worse and worse. So we're seeing a very dangerous trend in so-called Western democracy at the moment.
Boris Johnson obviously is going to sign that bill, and that will go into law. What has been the response by media, BBC, The Guardian, and the Daily Mail, ad nauseum?
The Guardian has opposed it. They actually had rather good editorial today, and I'm not a fan of The Guardian in general, as you know, but they had a rather good editorial today in which they said that this legislation shows that Boris Johnson is not the liberal he pretends to be. He pretends he's a liberal, but he's not really. He's not a liberal, he's a libertine. And in that he believes in freedom only for one person, which is Boris Johnson. He believes he personally should be exempt from all rules and laws, but he's not actually against directing everybody else in sort of harsh authoritarian ways. So the Guardian has been fairly good.
We're talking with Craig Murray. Craig Murray, if you want to see Craig Murray, you can go to the UC Global website, because I know you're there. And this is what I want to talk about next here when it comes to Assange, is that I thought when Stefania Maurizi won her case against the Crown Prosecutor Services, and she exposed them for collaborating or pressuring, colluding with Marian Nye and previous Swedish prosecutors to keep that bogus case alive. When she was able to expose, I thought that would be the end of the affair with Julian Assange. Didn't happen. Then I see the UC Global spying case, where they illegally spied on people like yourself, on Stella Morris and other attorneys, including me. I'm not an attorney, but I'm saying I was even filmed by them. But I thought after the UC Global scandal exploded, that would be the end of the case. Wasn't to be. Now you got this new revelation of, and I can't think of his name right now, in Iceland, a witness in the espionage case has recanted his testimony. I would think that would be enough to finish the case. Will it be? Talk about that for a minute, about this witness.
Just give me 1 minute break, Randy. I'll come back in a minute. And
all right, we're going to take a musical break. We'll be right back with Craig Murray. All right, we'll be right back with Craig Murray. I got to take a break too. was Dvorak, humoresque, a little piece of it. I'm Randy Credico live on the fly here on 99.5 FM, also on Assange Countdown to Freedom.com. We are talking with Craig Murray. I left you with that question, Craig. I left it hanging. We had the first thing, the CPS, corrupting the Swedish prosecutors. That was unveiled, and then you had the UC Global scandal. And both times I thought this would be enough to get the judge to say, all right, we're done. We're not giving you back. We're not giving Julian back to the US based on all of this information. That didn't happen. And now let's talk about the witness in the espionage case. And I can't think of his name. It's a long, he's from Iceland. Can you and will this end it?
No, sadly, I don't think it will have any major impact on the case. You're absolutely right. The fact that the United States government was spying on Julian's conferences with his defense attorneys would normally, in itself, be enough to stop the extradition. In any court in the world, if a prosecution is spying on the defendant's private conversations with his defense attorneys, any judge in the world is going to dismiss that. But in Julian's case, none of the usual rules apply. And similarly, the extraordinary thing about Siggy Forderson recounting his testimony isn't that he's recounted his testimony. The extraordinary thing is that the FBI ever accepted that testimony and that the United States government ever used that testimony in the first place. Siggy Forderson.
Yeah, there you go. That's the name. Who can pronounce that? I can't.
Well, I can pronounce it much better than I can pronounce the name of WikiLeaks editor-in-chief, Kristen Schaffenson, which I can never say at all. But
it's almost like learning Hungarian,
It's
trying to pronounce that name.
It's not easy dealing with all these lovely Icelandic people, but very hard to say their names. Yeah. Siggy Forderson had already been to jail for fraud. He was a convicted fraudster who'd been sent to prison for stealing money from WikiLeaks. And part of what he did was set up fundraisers claiming the money was going to WikiLeaks, but actually just stealing it. And part of what he did for that was he sent letters and emails signing himself as Julian Assange and impersonating Julian Assange. And one of the things he was convicted of impersonating Julian Assange. He's also on the sex offenders register, having done online grooming of young boys under the age of consent. So you have a convicted fraudster who's been impersonating Julian Assange and is a child sex offender. And this is the FBI's star witness. That is astonishing.
It's ironic because the CIA, the State Department, and the Crown Prosecutor Services and all these different organizations have framed Julian Assange, tried to, on some kind of sex charges. The whole thing was bogus. And now the main witness, one of the main witnesses against him, is someone who actually did commit sex offenses. Don't you find that ironic?
Yeah, it's astonishing. And the stuff, and he made up for them stuff about Julian Assange seeking to hack into Icelandic bank accounts, about Julian Assange seeking to hack the telephones of Icelandic members of parliament. I mean, why would Julian Assange want to do that anyway? But he just came up with all these accusations for the FBI. The FBI sent a team of 7 people to Iceland to meet him and interview him and get him to go through this. When the Icelandic government found out what was going on, the Icelandic government expelled the FBI team for carrying, because they didn't ask permission of the Icelandic government to come to their country and start this stuff. And the Icelandic government was well aware that they were engaged in the fraudulent concoction, the invention, the fabrication of accusations. So the Icelandic government actually expelled the FBI from Iceland, but they nonetheless went ahead with these charges, and these were the extra charges that were added between the Belmarsh Woolwich hearings and the Old Bailey hearings. These were the extra charges against Julian, in order for them to say he wasn't charged with journalism, he was charged with hacking the phones of Icelandic MPs and things. All that was just invented by the Siggy Thordarson chap. And I think in fullness of time, we almost certainly are going to know for sure that Thordarson was paid by the FBI to do this. My suspicion is the FBI gave him quite a lot of money in order to make these false allegations.
Yeah. They have the cover story that it was only 5,000, but there's no way I believe that at all. You give someone like that a couple $100,000 that is, dead broke, and they come up with the lies, and the guy obviously has no moral fiber. You have a lot of moral fiber. You did this when I saw you at Balmoral. The last day was February 27th. You were going on the following week to cover the Alex Salmond trial. I think that was beginning in March, and I don't know if it was two-legged or what, if it was just then. I mean, my memory's a little shot, but you went there and you covered it, and then you got yourself in Dutch. And it took all of us on this side of the pond think it was a reprisal for all of this stuff that you have done, Craig, exposing UK crimes in collaboration with the Uzbeki government, the bogus Salisbury poisoning of the Skripal, and many other. You've been there. You've shown a light on all of these, bogus UK allegations, and the stuff that they've done around the world, their collusion and the stuff with BAE. I thought when they charge you, it was really a reprisal for all of that, because you've pissed off a lot of people in high places.
Yeah, I think they've been looking for a way to get me in jail for a long time, to get rid of me and stop my activism and stop my writing. In particular, I've built an audience, which and my reports on the Assange trial were being read by 5 to 10 million people a day around the globe, and that obviously isn't something that they would want to be happening. So, yeah, I think plainly I was a target, and if they could find a way to jail me. And of course, from my reporting on the Assange trial, they found a way to jail me without a jury, without having a proper trial, just on the say-so of a judge or panel of judges. And that's what's happened. I've now been sentenced to jail for 8 months, and we're appealing at the moment. We've gone to the Supreme Court, and we've requested permission to appeal to the Supreme Court. And that's why I'm not sitting in jail at this moment. But yeah, it's
imminent. Craig, is it imminent that you actually will go to jail? Are you exhausting your appeals at the end of this month, July 29th?
Yes. If the Supreme Court refuses to take my appeal, then I will go to jail at the end of this month. In effect, that's where we are. I will then appeal to the European Court of Human Rights, but I'll have to do that from within prison, in effect.
Yeah, I mean, you could be in jail for a minimum of 4 months. I hear you usually serve half the sentence, and the European Court may not render its decision until after you've served your time. Is there a way that it can be expedited, or will the head judge, chief judge, what's her name, Lord? I can't think of her name right now. Will she grant you a stay of going to jail until the European Court decides?
Almost certainly not. I think that would be unprecedented. Mind you, there's a lot of things in my trial which are unprecedented, but they're all against me. I think to get them to do something unprecedented in my favor is extremely unlikely. No, I mean, I would certainly serve my sentence.
Where would it be, Craig? I mean, what kind of minimum security prison, maximum, some kind of a prison farm? Where would they put you?
There's no way of telling, really. that really is at their discretion. And I mean, there's no reason at all why Julian should be in a maximum security prison, but he is. My suspicion is they would also put me in a maximum security prison and probably into solitary for a while, purely, as a vindictive punishment.
Yeah, it's just amazing that this is actually happening to you, and it must right now. I know that you've been very cool today, and you've been calm and collective, but it's got to have some kind of psychological toll. The imminent prospect of being separated from your newly born kid, who's I think was born in February, and your son Cameron and your wife Nadira. I mean, this has got to be really weighing heavily in your heart.
It's extremely unpleasant, and certainly, if you like, the effect on my family and their unhappiness. Whereas I think if I was single, I'd be able to bear it very easily. If it didn't affect anyone except me, it really wouldn't worry me too much. And there are very few people who've really gone out to be fighters for freedom and fighters against the establishment who they don't manage to put in jail at some stage. Where it almost goes with the territory. So I'm not. It's not a massive surprise. It's a kind of persecution you might expect if you're, a whistleblower and exposer of state secrets, which is what I try to be. So, it's difficult. I won't pretend it's not difficult, but I'm less downhearted about it than you might expect.
Yeah, well, definitely this is an act of vindictiveness. I just can't imagine that you will be separated from your family, particularly with a newborn, in the situation that you're going to leave them in, how it couldn't weigh heavily on your spirit and your soul and your emotions here. And plus, I know you were on back in 2016 in December. You had just gotten out of the hospital, and you went through like a major proceeding back then, a blood transfusion. I don't want to tell all, but it was like a really hellish couple of days, maybe a week. And so let's be honest. I mean, you're not in great health, and they're going to put someone like you who's not in great health into a prison rather than you spending it at home under home arrest.
It is quite extraordinary. No, you're right. I mean, my cardiac conditions and my pulmonary, my lung conditions are serious and untreatable. Not untreatable, uncurable. You can treat them, but you can't cure them. When I was convicted of contempt of court for reporting more than the court wished me to report. That's what I was convicted of. When you're convicted in Scotland, you get a social work report, which is a compulsory part of the procedure, which the judge has to consider in determining the sentence. And they have to look at other options, like community service, send you to pick up litter or to teach French in a community college or whatever. And the report said I couldn't do any form of community service because I'm too unwell. My health wouldn't allow me to perform community service. And it's quite extraordinary that somebody deemed too ill to perform community service is sent to prison instead. And that really is
wow
example of how vindictive the state is doing.
This is a jigsaw. It's called a jigsawing, but it's a jigsawing case inside of a riddle, inside of a conundrum. Because I've had Mohammed Almazi on the show, and he laid it out, and there's nothing there. This is a big nothing burger. It's all, from my point of view and my learned point of view, and I've dealt with a lot of criminal justice cases. I've never seen anything. The Assange case, yes, but as extraordinary as this case, your case, and it's just, I know this is an act of vengeance against you, And I don't want the judge to get mad at me, but I think people should recognize it. And Craig has done so much for so many people over the years. And do you still have a defense fund, Craig?
Yeah, no, the defense fund is still running, and of course we need that to allow us to get, if the Supreme Court accepts the appeal in particular, then that's going to get very expensive. And if not, we have to go to the European Court of Human Rights, get even more expensive.
Craig, slowly spell it out how people can access, and I urge people to support Craig Murray Defense Fund. But how do people access it, Craig? Slowly spell it out for us.
Essentially, if you go to my website, craigmurray.org.uk, you can find their link on the page to donate, and that money goes straight into my defense fund. Also, you can you don't have to remember, if you just remember my name, Craig Murray, and just Google or whichever search engine you use, Craig Murray Defense Fund, it will come up. And I should say we've had some, people would be, maybe people won't be amazed in the United States. People in the UK are astonished when I explain to them how expensive it is, how the law just isn't available to ordinary people. And we have already spent £180,000, which is about $230,000 on my defense. That's what the lawyers have already been paid that, even before we get to the Supreme Court. But we've had some amazing help and contributions. The wonderful Roger Waters put in £20,000. Vivian Westwood put in £10,000. We've had that £180,000 has come from 13,000 different donors, 13,000 donors all around the world, and that's a lovely feeling that so many people are prepared to be helpful and support. And the smallest donation we've had is less than $1.
I think that was from me. No, I'm kidding.
But
when you were sued for libel, I did kick in then, and I'm going to set a precedent. I want listeners and viewers on Assange Countdown to Freedom to please help out Craig Murray's Defense Fund, because you've done so much, and you're going to lose a lot. You're not going to be able to make any money if you go to jail, and you're going to put your family in dire need if you go to jail. So I urge people to go to that website, craigmurray.org.uk, and help Craig Murray be extricated from this major injustice. This is definitely Kafkaesque. I will say it is Kafkaesque what has happened to you.
Yeah, but just 2 points I'll make there, which is, the first one is that we believe I'm the first person to be jailed anywhere in the world ever for jigsaw identification of a protected witness. And jigsaw identification means I didn't name a witness, and I didn't myself publish enough information to enable you to identify a witness, but I gave a piece of information which, if you put it together with things published by other people, would enable you possibly to work out who a witness was. And why it should be me that's then prosecuted, not the people who published the other bits, is a good question. But the second thing is I probably would do the whole 8 months in jail, because you can only get your remission if you admit you're guilty, if you see what I mean. And I'm not going to accept, you have to go through the whole, I accept I'm a very bad person and I repent thing. And I'm just not going to do that, because I don't believe I was guilty of any crime at all. I think it's complete nonsense.
Right. Well, listen, you can hear the entire layout of the charges and the sentencing of Craig Murray, folks, by going to our website, AssangeCountdownToFreedom.com, and there's an interview with Mohammed El-Mazi, and he lays it all out. This is like 3 or 4 weeks ago. So go to that, and he definitely exposes the flaws in the, I'll say it, the persecution of Craig Murray. Craig, I got to tell you, it's we're at the end of this show. I want to thank you for gracing us with your presence for our concluding Assange Countdown to Freedom program. Can you just, in conclusion, any last words about the Assange case?
Yeah, I think it is astonishing that the High Court in London still hasn't decided whether they're accepting the American appeal or not. And the United States government is appealing against the blocking of his extradition order, and he's still in a maximum security prison while they decide. And they've taken 5 months not yet to decide whether to hear the appeal. And on the 31st of July, the courts will go on holiday until September. And meantime, he's sat there in a maximum security jail. So I think it's become intolerable, the extent of the continued persecution of Julian. Plainly, the state is just locking him up for no reason now, and it amazes me that there's not more outcry about it.
Okay, thank you, Craig Murray. I'm Randy Credico, live on the fly here on 99.5 FM in New York City. This is our concluding Assange Countdown to Freedom program for right now, but it will be on our website, so don't worry about it. You can always go to our website, AssangeCountdownToFreedom.com, because this case is that important, as is Craig's case. But if you want to listen to the show, you can just go on Saturdays at 6 p.m. We will be simultaneously at the same time I used to do the show. Will be on our website, on YouTube and Facebook. And we're going to go out with the guy who gave you 20,000 pounds, Roger Waters, singing one of his classic tunes there in London a couple of months back. And we're going to go out with that. And we'll see you on Wednesdays, folks, at 2:30 p.m. on Live on the Fly on WBAI. Thank you very much. And once again, thank you, Craig Murray.
Thank you, Ben.
So you think you can tell heaven from hell, blue skies from pain? Can you tell it from a cold steel red, a smile from a veil? Do you think you can tell? And did they get you to trade your heroes for ghosts, hot ashes for trees, and hot air for cool breeze, cold comfort for change? And did you exchange a walk-on part of the war for a lead role in the picture? Thank